Hey there. In this video, we're going to talk about Git and GitHub a little bit, and then we're going to set up our GitHub repo and get ready for the rest of the class by cloning some code and preparing our coding environment. So before I dive in, I'm going to maybe just really briefly talk about what Git and GitHub are. So Git is a tool that's called a version control system, which is a kind of intimidating word for something that you've probably done already. So if you've ever had like a research paper or something that you were writing and you wrote it and you were ready to submit it and you probably called it like paper.doc or .txt or whatever. And then you realized that you had to make some changes to it and you didn't want to overwrite the safe copy. So you probably did something like make a copy of it. And then maybe you named it like paper final or something. And so at this point you have kind of two versions of your paper, and probably what happened is that you needed to make at least one more change. And so you made another copy and you called it something like paper really final, seriously this time, something like that. So if you've ever done something like this is a form of version control where you have different versions of the same content that kind of changes over time, and you've made changes and you have different versions of it. That's basically what version control is. So with that in mind, I'll just say that Git is a tool that helps you do that for many files at a time. We won't really use Git in this class, but I'm mentioning it just because that's what's used kind of behind the scenes. So instead of worrying too much about Git, let's jump over to GitHub. GitHub is a web page that basically, the way I describe it is it's kind of like social media for coders. So this is my actual GitHub account that I've logged into, and you can see that I kind of have a few things going on here. I have a feed of like the people I've followed, so I can see that like my friend George is doing stuff. Dan Schiffman is creating his own projects over here, and there's just a feed of different kind of coding activities that are happening. You'll also see that I have a bunch of like coding projects over here that I've worked on in the past, and that's a big part of what GitHub is just kind of organizing your projects into what are called repositories, which you can think of as kind of directories that contain a bunch of files. So that's kind of all you need to know about GitHub going in, I think. And so let's jump over to kind of the setup steps. So I'm on the class web page, and I'm here on the setup page. I think by the time you're watching this page will look a little bit different, so don't worry too much if it looks a little different from what you actually see. The important part is that you're looking for a link to the Intro to Web Dev repo or repository. So that's this link here. So I'm going to open that, new tab, doesn't matter, and you'll see that so a few things to notice. One is that this is my name up here, Kevin Workman, that's me, hi. And then Intro to Web Dev is the name of the repo. Kind of just notice that it's my name and then Intro to Web Dev, because that'll be important in a minute. You can look through the code and look through all the files and stuff, but what you really want to do is go up to this fork button that's right here. So I'm going to click that, and this is going to make a copy of this repo, and it's going to clone it or copy it into your personal account. So in this case, I've logged into just a kind of a fake account called Ada Example. So you'll notice that in this cloned version of the repo, it now has my name. Or my fake name. So this should say your name, basically. Still called Intro to Web Dev, but it should be your name, not Kevin Workman up here. And this is now your copy of the code. It's in your repo that you own, so feel free to change it and update it and do really whatever you want. And that's kind of how the class will work. But we'll get into that kind of later. But for now, I think the only thing you need to do is go to settings here. So we now have the code in a repo, in a directory on GitHub. And the other thing we want to do is enable something called GitHub Pages. So go to settings here, And then on the left down here in pages, check out the source section, and where it currently says none, change that to main. You don't really have to worry about exactly what this is doing. Hopefully that will become clear as we work through the next few weeks. But for now, you just need to enable this setting by clicking save here. And that will give you a URL. And I'm pretty sure this won't work yet. So let's try that out. Yeah. So it won't work yet because the way GitHub works, we have to make a change to it. So we can do that in a second. But the important thing is that you'll see this message. That means that you've successfully enabled GitHub pages. So you can go back to the code tab, which is kind of the default tab of a GitHub repo. And just for fun, here's what I'll do. Let's see. So let's check out the index.html page. And we will talk more about HTML as the class progresses, and so don't worry too much if you're not super familiar with what this is doing. But just to kind of test things out, what I want you to do is click this little pencil icon, which will let you edit the file directly in GitHub. Generally, I wouldn't recommend editing files this way, but just to get something working and just to test that everything's connected, this is a good way to do it. So let's see. So this site contains, maybe just make a tiny change here that says like this site contains Ada's homework projects for intro to web development. Change this to whatever your name is. You can change really anything you want. It's your code now. And then down here towards the bottom, click commit changes. And so now you'll see that your change is in GitHub here. And we can go back to sort of the top level. And then what I'm hoping is that if we go back to that URL that we had opened up from our settings page, the GitHub pages URL, if you click refresh now this will work. And yeah, now you see that it has the content and contains my change that I just made. So you should see your change that you just made. We'll talk a lot more about exactly what just happened and all of the different things you can do and HTML and all that good stuff in the next few weeks. But this step was really about getting GitHub set up and getting GitHub pages working and making at least one change. So if you see your name in a GitHub pages URL like this, then you are good to go and you can keep working and work through the environment setup and then move on to coding in HTML. All right, see ya.